Good afternoon. Welcome everyone to our monthly series, Food for Thought. Today we're going to talk a little bit about extended school year services, also known as ESY. So extended school year services is outlined in the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, and I put the important points to know about in bold. So it's something that is determined by the IEP team. So in Connecticut, the IEP team is also known as the PPT, the Planning and Placement Team. And it's important to know that these services are determined on an individual basis based on a student's unique needs. So hello? Oh, sorry. So the district cannot choose to say that a student can't receive services because they don't have the correct disability category. So it's something that can be considered for any student. And the districts cannot limit the type or amount of services. So I point these two things out because in the past, CPAC has received calls about what districts can and can't do with regard to limiting services. And so districts can't say, well, we have this one particular program in our district and we don't do anything else. So it's really, as with anything else with a student with an IEP, it's based on an individualized discussion about a child's individualized needs. So the definition of extended school year services in IDEA outlines that these services go beyond the normal school year of the public agency, and that they're in accordance with the child's IEP, and that they're at no cost to the parents of the child. So a few things to know about extended school year services. As we said, it must be determined by the PPT team, and a determination must be made each school year. So it doesn't mean just because a student received ESY one year that they automatically are eligible for services as they continue on in special education. It's usually talked about at the annual review, which is generally happening around this time of year. And so some people have already had their annual reviews, or some people have had PPT meetings where extended school year services have already been decided. I was just talking with my colleague Lisa, who's here on the call, and she was mentioning that this conversation already happened for her kids, and my colleague Leona said the same thing. If this conversation has not happened yet, then requesting a meeting right away is really important if you don't have a meeting already scheduled. And the purpose being is if there is a disagreement about what services, what if and what services are offered for extended school year, then it takes some time for conflict resolution. So if there is a disagreement and families and districts decide to go to mediation or due process over extended school year, then there should be enough time before the start of the program. So often we get calls of parents. I mean, I think both Lisa and Leona, you probably have experienced this, where it's like mid-May or beginning of June, and people are just starting the dispute resolution process. Have you both gotten those calls? Yeah.
Yeah, I think people think, I feel like that end of the school year comes so fast that you think you have all this time until that first week of June when ESY normally starts. But when you take into account that you have to have a PPT, if there's a disagreement, then you have to kind of add all that time in for due process and things like that, then you're already kind of too late. So this is really when you have to be doing it. We had our, for Emmett, my oldest, we had our annual review back in the fall, but we had, and ESY wasn't determined yet. We had a follow-up PPT at the beginning of March, just to determine if we thought that ESY services were going to be good for him. And it was determined this year that yes, we were going to do ESY for him. So it is all set, and we're all set and ready to go forward. But if you haven't done it yet, I would suggest doing it as soon as April break is over.
I want to add too, is because it's just sometimes we get calls that say, why are they discussing it now? I want to discuss, his current progress or her current progress. So just understanding why it's important that the schools are having a conversation now. This is normal time of year to have it, and the reason behind it.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And one of the other things is typically, and if we put last year aside and COVID aside, if there's a program like a camp program or something like that a student might go into for their ESY services because it's appropriate for them, these programs start filling up this time of year. So the earlier the determination is made, the better. So a little bit about eligibility. So this is the wordy legal version of the eligibility. And this comes out of a US Supreme Court case many years ago. And most states have adopted looking at regression, recoupment criteria, and non-regression criteria. Whew, mouthful. So I will share this PowerPoint. I actually have all of the handouts and everything in a Google Drive. So I'll share that link both on Facebook and here, and when we post this video on YouTube. But I found this great list of questions that actually mirrors the previous slide, only in language that we might actually use. As families, we might more commonly use, as opposed to regression and recoupment and that sort of thing. And this comes from our sister center in Pennsylvania, the Peel Center. And so these are questions that we can talk about at a meeting, or things that families can think about before they go into a meeting to talk about ESY. So we think about things like, will a student lose skills? Will they take a long time to catch back up? Is it unlikely that a student will maintain learned skills or behaviors due to that break through the summer? Will the break substantially reduce the student's chance of ever learning critical life skills or behavior? Is a student at a critical stage for mastering a skill related to the IEP goals of self-sufficiency and independence from caregivers? Will repeated breaks in education result in the student withdrawing from learning? And the severity of the student's disability. For example, autism, intellectual disability, degenerative impairments with mental involvement, and or multiple disabilities. But it doesn't, again, just because they have been determined to have one of these disabilities as their primary disability category, doesn't guarantee that they will be eligible for extended school year services. It still needs to go back to that individualized determination. So anything else, Lisa or Leona, you want to add around questions or things that families can consider and look at?
I always think about after Christmas break, after April break, if we've had a long quarantine. So if you've been put on quarantine this year, if you see regression after those things, like if it's behavioral, if your kid's going back to school and all of a sudden there's an increase in behaviors that they didn't have before, that's good to document, to be able to bring to PPT to request ESY, because you're showing, hey, listen, in this 10-day absence or in these 2 weeks, my child had this regression that we'd like to kind of not have happen over the 10 weeks of summer, because if it's happening in only 2 weeks, what is it going to look like in 10 weeks? So I think that's a really big thing to do for Milo, who's my 6-year-old, he has autism, and we know that he regresses in skill really quickly without practicing them. So ESY, and then we also have camps built into that, to his summer schedule, just to make sure that there's no regression, because we have history and documentation of it happening prior. So I think it's just really good to document everything always.
Mhm. Yeah, for my son, it was when we looked at ESY, it was really his social engagement that was a major challenge for him. And so we, if he was out for even, like you said, a couple of weeks, it would take another couple of weeks for him to begin to engage at the level that he was engaging socially within the school environment. And then, on top of that, when he would return to school, and I know this is very common for most kids because it's generally new staff, each year, maybe not all new staff, but a lot of the staff would be new. There might be new students in the classroom. So it almost took until October for my son to really get into that groove again. So if we were not maintaining some consistency in programming, he would really lose skills.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, the social piece of it, I think we forget, because we think of summer as very social. But if our kids don't necessarily have that skill naturally, and it's a skill that they've struggled to learn, then it's a skill that can it can regress quickly. So yeah, it's a huge piece.
Yeah. And then just the behavior of not having the consistent program.
Yeah.
Some place to go every single day, because summer, tends for some families to be kind of a little bit more laid back.
Yeah, unscheduled. Let's go here today and maybe tomorrow. And for kids that thrive on routine, it's a difficult transition. For us, it's the only time Milo takes the bus at all. So it's his favorite time of year to go to school, because he gets to ride a bus, because he thinks he's the coolest on the bus. So that's our bonus of summer. That's how I get him to go.
That's exciting.
Happily. Yeah.
I wish I had something like that. I think at one time, but I don't think Matthew's ever liked the bus. He's slowly learned to take it, but with COVID, he hasn't had to. But I wish that we were able to do that for him. We've negotiated a lot of things over the years to make something work for him. And, when we talk about summer and the fact, ESY, and we make the decision, you go through, I think these questions are fabulous. You go through the questions and you make the decision that's right for your family, because you also have to make sure that you have time in your family, that this is what fits in your work / maybe vacation schedule. I know that we've worked with the teachers over the years to come up with ways to encourage him. We would do the rewarding based on the school system, for him to participate and engage. Obviously, COVID was a really difficult year. And the reason we did summer school last year was not for any of the skills, but for the consistency of learning technology, because we didn't know what September was going to look like. And since we couldn't keep him on the computer for more than 5 minutes at a time, summer school was really about staying engaged for those periods of time. And although I don't think we're overly successful, because we're a year into the pandemic and we can't get him to stay for more than maybe 10 minutes at a time, we doubled capacity. It did just provide that consistency of expectation, So I do think you have to look at the skills. What are you looking to do this year? What are your goals? I mean, at one year for us, it might have been catch up. At another, it might have been not to regress. Other times it might be social skills. And I think that's why we're making the decision this year, because I think it's more of a social skills call for us this year than skills.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I think that also comes along with age too. Leona, your boys are a little older than my kids. So my kids are still in the very foundational educational piece of it, I think. So Milo being a kindergartner this year, I think is big for him not to regress in the reading piece. He doesn't necessarily want to do that with me. So for us to be practicing that more efficiently, I think he needs to be at ESY. And then my oldest is a 5th grader. I think this will be probably his last year of ESY for the same reasons, for him to be wanting to be around friends and socialize more. And he doesn't necessarily need the daily kind of instruction there. We could kind of piecemeal something together really great for him as he's getting older and not needing that educational impact as much as when he was younger, even last year.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, because there are years with my son that we had him in, and I would say those were the years that he was younger. And as he got a little older, we either made different decisions or different choices of what he would do for the summer. And sometimes that was under the umbrella of the school district, and sometimes it wasn't. So again, it goes back to the unique needs of that individual child and your family, in the context of your family as well. You know, I do know families that are exhausted and, you know, don't want to engage in services, and then other families that know that that consistency is so important for their family and for their child. So this slide is just a few examples of the different types of extended school year services. So again, looking at the individual needs of the child. So some may need that academic math and reading instruction and related services. Some, it might be the social skills and the behavior. There's all kinds of different varieties of things that students will need based on their IEP and based on their IEP goals. What have they been working on? So, and you know, note in the middle box in the second row, so some students may not need extended school year services. So it's not a guarantee, it's not a given that just because your child has an IEP that they will be eligible for services. And this also comes from our sister center in Pennsylvania, the Peel Center. So just a couple of other points. Extended school year is different than compensatory education and recovery services. They're 3 very different things. There's a lot of talk right now about compensatory services and about recovery services. And compensatory services generally happen when a school hasn't provided FAPE for some reason. And so it's like that, going back and making up what was missed. And recovery services can be regular education, can be special education. There's some information that will hopefully be coming out from the state very soon about all of this. And so what we can expect from districts and what the requirements are. Extended school year is not a daycare or respite. Every single year we get calls from families that say, my child's not eligible for extended school year services and I work during the day. So what am I going to do with them? And while as parents, we all understand that challenge and that concern, that's not the responsibility of the school district, unfortunately. So there are different resources that we could help families find and navigate should that be the case. Our contact information will be at the end, so certainly people can reach out to CPAC about that. And families are part of the decision-making process. So the first slide about the law says it's the decision to be made at an IEP meeting, which is a PPT meeting in Connecticut. Families are a part of that team. So it's not like, okay, I'm going to go in and talk about extended school year services and see if the district will say yes or no. Like, it's supposed to be a conversation. We're supposed to be looking at a variety of different things, all of the things that we just talked about, behavior, social skills, nature of the child's disability. And especially now with COVID, I think including data and information from the family is more important than ever. It's always been important. I don't want to say that it hasn't been, but for people who have been remote learning, it's probably the most important information, that is on the table, is the information from the families. So this is just a little bit about what the federal guidance says. So there was guidance that came out back in September. The feds were a little bit behind on talking about extended school year in September, but I pulled out a few things that I think will apply now as we're looking at our second summer since the pandemic started. And the feds talk about the child's entitlement to needed extended school year services continues. Oh, I can't see my own slide. Continues to apply even if the schools and other facilities are closed due to COVID-19. And public agencies should consider providing extended school year services to the child during the normal school year, during breaks or vacation where appropriate to the child's needs and consistent with applicable standards. So that they put that in there because last summer it was really hard for a lot of school districts to do ESY services because of the school closures. I just wanted to keep this in here because there's still some unknown about what's happening. Schools have opened more frequently, as is being reported to me anyway, for longer periods of time. But also then there are outbreaks that are happening. And so then we see schools pull back on that. Lisa and Leona, would you say that that's what you're seeing as well?
Absolutely. Yeah. I think that, we are very lucky. We were in a district that was full-time from the beginning of the school year, but I think we're in the minority there. And lots of families have said, my kid hasn't been in school since last March. They just went back and now they're already in quarantine. Wow. So I think that it will, it'll play out hopefully positively, but there's always, there's so much unknown in this current education that we'll have to wait and see. So we all have to be as patient as possible, I guess, which is so difficult.
It is. It really is.
Yeah. We've been open full-time since the beginning too, but I think that's an advantage for us, Lisa, because our schools have had the opportunities to kind of go through what all of these other districts are going through. I mean, we opened full-time and we were in quarantine in October. And as the quarantines have come and gone, they've changed. We used to close down our high school, but they've been able to perfect their tracing methods a little bit better in the school. And so now it's, first contacts and things like that. So I feel like we had an advantage by opening that way because we've been able to go through the process that a lot of these other schools are just starting to go through at this point in the process because they're just getting back to school. So.
Yeah, so it remains to be seen, but school districts are still required to do it in some way, shape, or form if a student is eligible. And then the state guidance, the federal guidance and the state guidance are also in that that Google Drive with the PowerPoint presentation. And this is probably the document that I use the most with families to bring into their school districts to have those conversations. So this one, and then the questions on that slide in the box that we talked about, questions to consider, those I think are two tools that I would suggest using for families to use to talk about ESY with their school districts. And so this is the COVID document. I mean the topic brief, which is also in the Google drive. Sorry about that, my mistake. So the State Department of Ed in May of last year talked about schools working with families, being flexible, being reasonable, knowing that conditions might change. And I think that's not, I think things have got, lessened since last May, obviously. But I think we still need to, be reasonable, be flexible, know that things may change even in the middle of extended school year services. So schools should do everything that they can, to support the student and give the student the services that they need. And then this is just our contact information should people have questions. There's always those individualized situations that we can't, we don't effectively address in a short presentation like this. So please reach out to us and, ask us your questions. We can help you navigate through, all of this, working with the district to get appropriate services, what to do if you disagree, conflict resolution process. We're here to help. So are there any questions on Facebook that you guys can see? No, it's quiet.
No questions posted.
Okay. And we have somebody on that. If you have a question, you're welcome to unmute or pop some information in the chat. Lisa or Leona, any words of wisdom for families as we are into spring and moving quickly into summer?
I think to emphasize the individualization of the summer program, just like the IEP, it's not what the district has put together for ESY, but what is going to work best for the student. I still think that so often we forget that piece, that it's still supposed to be. So I guess I'm just emphasizing what you've said about individualization of the program for summer too.
Yeah, I agree. It's not a one size fits all. So just like throughout the school year, it's continued education that is right for your child. So and don't forget it's going to be fun. Maybe, hopefully there's fun parts of it as well. So
yeah, I think that most people try to make it fun in the summer as well.
Yeah,
all the teachers that I know, will bring some fun components into it, or just trying to make the learning a little bit more light, a little bit more fun.
Yeah, my kids always end up having fun. They always like it once they're there. It's just kind of like I think the first day of like, oh, going back to school. But then once they're there, they see their friends again, and the teachers do such a great job making sure that they're having fun, knowing it's their summer too. So
I think that's key too, is that those teachers have, chosen to be part of the summer program. And so they do try to go even further than teachers usually do to make it engaging. I mean, I had a teacher one time, my son stayed for extra support after ESY. Ooh, isn't that to get a kid to stay a little bit longer? But she liked Savers, and he loves to look for vintage things. So that was their connection. She found it, and every time he went, they would talk, did you go? Did I go? What's the best thing you ever found? And by the time they were done, that those OG services flew by. So it's really those, whatever the teachers do that make it just a little bit extra fun, whether it's a game on Thursdays or a reward system or whatever they come up with. I don't know any summer my son, even not wanting there, hasn't walked away with something that was fun.
Yeah, I agree. I was telling Beth right before this that the first year Emmett was in first grade, and he was a really struggling reader. Now we know he has dyslexia, but we didn't really know that then. And part of me getting him to be excited about going was he had his little brown bag lunch that had a snack, and every day I would write a new joke on it, and him and his teacher would read it first, and then he would read it to everybody in the whatever grade he's in. And I still have to write those every day for ESY because he's like, Mom, what are you going to get some new jokes? And I was like, oh, I want to try. Like, it's hard to do 5th grade jokes. So I don't know what I want to do this summer. They should be, I don't know, dad jokes. I guess.
I was going to say definitely dad jokes, but that's awesome.
Yeah. So it's he's like, I was so much more confident and people laughed, Mom. And he's a really funny kid, but he's not a overly confident kid in his humor. Like he's kind of shy about it. So it was just a way to get him out there, get him reading, get him practicing and talking in front of people. So
what great teamwork with the staff and
our
him
teachers
and
are the
you.
best. I love our
That's
teachers.
great.
Yeah. Well, thanks so much for having us.
Yeah, thank you, everyone. Great discussion today. And we will see you next month.
Bye. Thank you.